On your Friday episode of Locked On Raptors, Pascal Siakam looks incredible for the Pacers in the conference finals, and it's making me sad. So I spent the day looking for the guys in this year's draft who stand the best chance of being the next Pascal Siakam. We get into that on today's show. Thanks for hanging.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Friday. Yeah, Friday. That's right. Yeah, Friday, May the 24th. I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 10 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on the Hell website at Woodley Sean. You can find the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors. And of course, you can join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. Come and hang out. Great place to be, talking draft, talking playoffs, talking Pascal Siakam, talking all kinds of good basketball stuff, plus movies and food and all the 9 yards, WNBA talk, all going on in the Discord. A great little community we got building around the show. If you want to join it, it's free. Link in the description. Come do it. Would much appreciate you joining our little listener family. Of course, you can find the show for free wherever you get your podcasts. Follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. Always appreciated when you support the show, however you support the show. And of course, you can go to YouTube as well. Subscribe to the video feed of the show. And when you do that, you can also hit the little notification bell and get a heads up via push notification every single time the show goes live or premieres. It says, hey, stop what you're doing. Sean's talking. It's a wonderful pitch, I think. So go ahead and do that. Much appreciated. Also appreciated today our pals at LinkedIn Jobs who help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's get to it. Back to some draft coverage on today's show after a bit of a week of not doing it, which is fine. There's plenty of draft guys to talk about and plenty of time to do it. But I wanted to get back in because watching Pascal Siakam eviscerate the defense of the Boston Celtics through the first 2 games of the Eastern Conference Finals, which, yeah, the Celtics are up 2-0. They should be up 2-0. They should sweep this series. They're much better than the Pacers are. But watching Pascal Siakam be awesome has made me very sad. People who know me and listen to this podcast know I'm not a fan of what went down with Pascal Siakam and the Raptors this season, and I'm not going to go relitigate the trade or anything like that, but watching him over these first 2 games of the East Finals has made me think, man, oh man, it would be really cool if the Raptors could go find themselves the next Pascal Siakam in this year's draft in order to, be a bit of an ointment to the sting that those who liked Pascal on the Raptors and wanted to see more of Siakam on the Raptors with Barnes and Quickly and Barrett. Those 4 games, baby, we'll never forget. It's like they're going to haunt me forever. But for those of you who want Pascal Siakam replicated over the next little stretch of Raptors basketball here, the draft is the way to go try to find the next Pascal Siakam. And I guess before we start here, we're going to talk about 3 prospects today who I think kind of fit the mold of guys who could go on pretty ridiculous, career arcs when it comes to development. This is a difficult thing, of course, because I'm sitting here trying to pinpoint guys who might have once-in-a-generation development curves like Pascal Siakam had. And before we dive in, it's important to note, there is no next Pascal Siakam. The growth that he took from being a 22-year-old rookie, which is already kind of a strange thing, a guy starting at 22 having the development he had from the player he was as a rookie, where he just basically ran the floor and finished outlet passes from Kyle Lowry, to the sort of mid-range assassin that he is now, this sort of post-up demon, all the stuff that he's become, a 2-time All-NBA player, a champion, a most improved player, yada, yada, yada. We know the tale of the tape with Pascal Siakam. There is not going to be another development story that exactly follows that. This is the part of basketball I like. No one's, sort of story or no one's game is the same. And so you're never going to get an exact like-for-like replica of Siakam's career arc, and that needs to be known here. But I do think 3 guys we're going to talk about today, I think stand a chance of kind of going on interesting development curves over the next few seasons as they, join the NBA potentially, if they're drafted at all, and, maybe end up being much higher upside players than they project or look like they might be right now here in 2024 in the lead up to next month's draft. And so we're going to get into Jonathan Mogbo. We're going to talk about Isaiah Crawford. We're going to talk about Ulrich Chomche today on the show. Again, before we get into Mogbo, who I think is probably maybe the most interesting guy because of the connections to Scottie Barnes and his like very sort of short college career that gives us very little sample, but a lot of growth from year to year in his 2 years playing in college and in D1 at least. I just want to kind of get into the theory of taking a swing on a guy who maybe right now seems like 19 for Mogbo or Crawford or Chomche. Like maybe that's too much. The sort of philosophy of reaching in this draft. I've been of the mind that I'd like to see the Raptors go for more polished players, guys who can come in and like help right away. I would really, really enjoy that, frankly. I like guys who are adults who know how to play basketball and can sort of tie together lineups, which the Raptors, I think, badly need, especially on the wings. We also know they need some backup big play and backup guard play and all this stuff. And so if you can get guys who are ready to do that right away, I'm all on board. And I think this draft in particular is one rich with those types of guys who may not have star upside, but can certainly be very nice rotation players over the next few years, which at 19 and 31 in any draft, you're happy to get. But in this draft in particular, I think that's where this draft strength lies, in guys who project as not stars, but guys who make winning basketball teams, sort of whole and complete. I do think, though, there is a case that, the Raptors maybe do go high upside with at least one of their picks, maybe both. You want to have higher upside, to sort of pair around Scottie Barnes and Emmanuel quickly from a third guy. Maybe the draft is the way to do that, right? There's always trades. There's always being opportunistic and finding guys to maybe make a swing for. But, if you can draft a guy in-house and turn him into a star, that's the best way to go about it. It's also the hardest way and very, very unknowable and hard to project and all of that. But I do think that, we've seen the Raptors in the past not really worry about consensus, not really worry about making upside plays. We've seen it going back as far as Bruno Caboclo back in 2014, where that was, the whole 2 years away from being 2 years away thing. Everybody knows about that. That was an absolute high upside swing with a lot of downside potential. And I could see there being a case for the Raptors doing that with one of the picks they have. I don't think I'd like to see them go crazy upside pick with both picks. I would like to get one guy who you feel pretty good about being a rotation player for the next 4 to 7, 8 years, whatever it is that they'll be with the team. But one of these picks being used to maybe try to score a potential future star, you could do a lot worse than that having the 2 picks. That gives them the flexibility to kind of choose. If they only had 1 pick, I'd probably go more on the safe side just to get someone in the door who can help with the depth issues this team has struggled with for years now. I have been a little bit lukewarm on the idea of a swing, but I do think with this draft, there's no one that you're going to, if you don't take one of those role player guys, I don't see many of these sort of projected role player types having crazy, super high upside that's going to make you feel bad for not taking them. Obviously, this is the draft. Things go wrong. Predictions are wrong all the time. So I'll eat crow on that. If Tristan da Silva becomes a superstar, then I'll eat crow on that statement right there. If anyone even remembers I said it. But I do think because this talent pool feels so flat, because this group of players, it's just, you look at any mock draft, any big board, guys between like 20 and 70, like there's like a wide range of where guys are being mocked and ranked and, projected to land. I think, going for a reach at 19 or something like that, I don't even know if you can really classify it as a reach with this class because of how bizarre this class seems to be and how sort of unique it is in its flatness and the number of guys, frankly, you could make a case for going a lot higher than they're maybe projected to go. There's just a lot of dudes in this draft with interesting things going on, whether it's upside, whether it's moldable NBA skills, whether it's, base role player upside, all that type of stuff. There's just a lot of guys. And so I think if the Raptors were to go and reach on someone that we talk about today at 19, it might sound crazy on the night of, and wow, they took this guy over this guy. Wow, what are they doing? But like the Raptors have a history of this. They don't care. They don't give a damn about consensus. They will take the guy that they think is the best and trust their scouting. And hey, like Dan Tolzman and his team, they've done a pretty good job with this all told over the years. Malachi Flynn being like the glaring, example of them sort of not doing so hot in this regard. But for the most part, they've been very good at picking out their guys and riding with them. And a lot of the time, you get a lot of success out of it. Norman Powell, Pascal Siakam, Scottie Barnes, of course, was deemed to reach at 4 over Jalen Suggs. That seems to be working out pretty darn well. They've done this in the past. They have reached on guys. They reached on Bruno as well and did not apologize. So I would not be shocked if one of the guys we talk about today, who I'm very rarely seeing mocked in the top 30 for anybody, I think Chomche is at like 24 on the Ringers draft board right now. So like maybe there's some potential there. That's not really like considered a huge reach or whatever. He's one of these sort of high upside riser types. But if the Raptors were to take one of the guys we talk about today at 19, I don't think it's like a cause for concern or cause for sort of vitriol towards the front office. I just think it's a symptom of there not really being any reaches at this part of the draft at 19 or 31. If there's a guy you really want at 19 and your intel says somewhere that another team values him and you're worried he won't be there at 31, take him at 19. Who cares? Like this is a very flat range of the draft, and just getting two guys who you like, two guys who you deem as your guys at 19 and 31 feels like a pretty successful outcome to the draft, even if maybe the consensus doesn't agree with who you take. I think I trust the internal evaluations of the Raptors front office a lot more than, Joe Internet or whatever. And certainly my own, right? So yeah, that's kind of my take and philosophy on how this draft should be approached when it comes to the reaches or the high upside plays or whatever. Like I think everyone's going to have their own evaluations of guys in this draft. Everyone's going to have certain do not drafts that the other teams say that guy's a clear guy that we got to draft, right? Like there's just such wide ranges of opinions on these guys that I don't think you could be surprised by anything on draft night or upset about anything on draft night, barring some, crazy thing that makes us all upset inevitably. But yeah, for the most part, whoever they take at 19 and 31, they will have had their reasons for taking them there. And let's get into some of these guys, because I do think there's some pretty interesting dudes to talk about in the 19 and 31 range that maybe are not being mocked in that range right now, who could have the Pascal Siakam-like growth curve that makes us all very, very happy over the course of the next however many years. We'll get to that. Start with Jonathan Mogbo coming up in just one sec. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion with a B professionals, which makes it the best way to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. I have been a hiring manager before. It's a lot. It takes up a lot of time, and there's not really time to do all the other stuff you got to do when you have a small business. So let LinkedIn be your hiring manager for you. 2.5 million small businesses are using LinkedIn for hiring. You should be doing that as well. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, back at it here as we take a look at guys who just might have a sort of look. Are we talking like guys who might have a once in a generational development curve? Sure, let's dub it that. Guys who project to maybe have a once in a generation development curve in the NBA, who the Raptors might be in the mix for at 19 or 31. Let's start with Jonathan Mogbo, who is a friend of Scottie Barnes, notably. Scottie Barnes posted about him a little bit over the course of the summer. This has been a thing that's kind of, I think drawn a lot of connections and lines. Who maybe he's the guy the Raptors reach on. He also is very much like in the classic mold of a Toronto Raptors-ass player. It should be noted as well. It's not just the connection to Scottie Barnes. He does a lot of things the Raptors could use. Mogbo is a bit of an interesting story. Played 2 years at community college, had no offers to D1 schools coming out of high school. Had like a late growth spurt from what you read. He was like going into high school like a kind of a small combo guard and has grown into being a 6'8" dude with a 7'2" wingspan and a 9-foot plus standing reach, who this past season played for San Francisco in D1. Again, childhood AAU teammate of Scottie Barnes. The tail of the tape, 14 points, 10 boards, 4 assists at school last year, 64% from the field, almost exclusively from 2-point range. I think all but one attempt was from 2, 69% from the line, and no 3-point shooting to speak of, as I mentioned. 0.1 attempts per game, did not hit a 3 in 2 years at college. Played at Missouri State the year before last. And so, yeah, it's a bit of a late bloomer story, a bit of a development. If you're trying to draw the lines to Pascal Siakam, also kind of a late bloomer story, right? Everybody knows by now If you've not watched one of the Eastern Conference Finals games, I'm sure they'll tell you the story in Game 3. Pascal Siakam came to basketball pretty late and then figured things out from there. Mogbo, played longer. He's been in the AAU circuits and stuff growing up, so it's not like he picked up a ball at 17, but he found his sort of groove as a player much later, playing, having gone to community college for 2 seasons before getting into D1. Some pretty interesting stuff that kind of pops off the screen when you watch Mogbo. Again, the lack of 3-point shooting is going to have to be overcome by all of these other little things, because I do think the 3-point shooting, you just have to expect it's not going to be part of his package. We can get into a couple small reasons for optimism there, but this is a guy who's going to live around the rim and is probably going to feature kind of as like a small ball center, I think. He can switch across a bunch of positions. That really pops off the screen. I think he has a chance to be like a pretty awesome pick and roll defender from what you watch, whether it's switching, whether it's dropping, whether it's hedging and recovering. He covers a ton of ground. His arms go for days, and he's just built like he's built. He's thick. He's strong. He's super, super powerful. And, you watch him like guard in the post and things like that. It's hard to back the dude down. Again, he's playing against guys from D1. I'm not even sure what conference San Francisco is in. So, you're backing down, dudes who are backing it down, not exactly Joel Embiid out there, but super strong, really strong base at 6'8". And again, that 7'2" wingspan kind of makes him seem a little bigger than 6'8". Hell of a rebounder as well. 29.3% defensive rebounding percentage. To show how good that is, Jakob Poeltl, the Raptors' best rebounder last season and currently on the roster, never had a higher defensive rebounding percentage than 26%. Donovan Clingan, enormous man, 7'3", whatever he is, going to be drafted very high. 23.5% rebounding percentage this past season on the defensive end, that is. 29.3 defensive rebounding percentage for Mogbo. Zach Edey, also enormous man, 25.4 defensive rebounding percentage. So Mogbo at 6'8", out rebounding those guys just as like a percentage of team rebounds grabbed by a pretty substantial margin. Also a 14.5 offensive rebounding percentage, better than Clingan, better than Chris Boucher's career high in the NBA, a man who's all about offensive rebounds. The guy can grab boards. He's a vacuum on the glass. That's a thing that any team can use, certainly. And again, all these different little things that Mogbo can do will all have to be so high level to overcome the lack of shooting from a guy who is a nominal 4/5. He's pretty high level at a lot of this stuff. Again, scoring around the rim, shot 64% from the field, almost exclusively on twos. That's very encouraging. Finishes around the rim with a pretty deft touch. He's also got a bit of playmaking to his game, and it's not like face-up playmaking. His handle is nowhere near the level it needs to be to go and break guys down off the dribble necessarily, but he can run that sort of elbow stuff, nice little entry passes, nice passes to cutters, things like that. That all kind of pops when you watch his long film session. You can go and check out like 2.5 hours of Mogbo clips on YouTube. You just go to Hardwood Hoop Central's NBA Draft Green Room YouTube page. They have like 2.5, 3 hour cuts of like a lot of prospects, and Mogbo is one of them. A lot of really interesting stuff to watch in there, and you get a pretty good feel of the good and bad of a guy's game when you watch that much film, of course. I think Mogbo defensively, obvious plus. The playmaking, you could run elbow stuff that you typically run with the Raptors. And I do think his size and positional versatility makes it so like he could probably moonlight as a 5 next to Kelly Olynyk in lineups where Olynyk's on the floor. The fit with Poeltl's a little trickier because he can't shoot. The fit with Scottie Barnes, frankly, is tricky because he can't shoot. And again, I don't think you can really expect him to become a shooter just because there's just no tape of him being a shooter anywhere. Maybe that's something they can work on. Maybe they see something in his jump shot mechanics that they feel like they can, groom into a decent 3-point shooter. But I think you have to just go in. If the Raptors were to take him, any 3-point shooting you get from him at any point is gravy on top of the package that the player really brings. The one sort of glimmer of hope for the 3-point shot, he was a 43% free throw shooter at Missouri State. He jumped to 69% this past season. That's a massive leap. Makes it so you go from the hacking zone to like pretty passable. Maybe that suggests there's some touch there that a 3-point shot could then sort of be developed with. Hard to say. But again, he can certainly run a lot of your elbow stuff on offense. He can finish around the rim for you. He could probably be a screen and dive guy if he really kind of worked on it. There's a lot of moldability to what he does. Again, handle's got to come a long way. I like Mogbo quite a bit. I think it would be a little rich for my blood if they were to take him at 19, just because there is so much that he needs to work on. And the 3-point shooting is this kind of glaring thing that just may never be there. And so 19, probably a little much, but 31, if you want to take Mogbo there, you want to make Scottie Barnes happy bringing his buddy. I think you could do a lot worse than Jonathan Mogbo at 31. So yeah, that's kind of the read on him. Very fun player, super interesting. He's been a riser in the draft process, it seems, from a lot of people who are in the know. We'll see how much a 4 who can't shoot can actually sort of rise in the draft. We'll see if there's any competition for him. If he goes high, a team similarly looking for a high upside play, maybe Mogbo's one of them. You know, what odds do I give him of beating Pascal Siakam? Well, 0, because no one will be Pascal Siakam, because that's an unbelievable arc to go on. But certainly has the case, the sort of background, the late bloomer sort of element and all of that to suggest that there's a better player than currently exists than Jonathan Mogbo going forward, even though he's 22 years old. We'll come back on the other side, rattle through a couple more guys. So there's a little bit less intel on. One of them played D1 college, so there is plenty of tape on him. The other one, there's like none on at all. So we're going to talk about Isaiah Crawford and Ulrich Chomche coming up in just 1 second to round up the show. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, a couple more guys to talk about here at the end of the show who might have some pretty awesome sort of development upside within them based on the skills they bring to the table. And I guess the first guy I want to talk about is Isaiah Crawford. He's a Louisiana Tech guard wing type, 6'6", more so wing, I suppose, in the NBA. Had the ball in his hands a lot for Louisiana Tech. Played full long college career. What was it, 5 full seasons? Yeah, 5 seasons at Louisiana Tech. 22 years old, going to be 23 by the time the new season starts. So again, on the older side of things in that Pascal Siakam mold, 6'6" with a 7-foot wingspan, average 16, 6, and 2 with 2.1 steals and 1.7 blocks. We'll talk about the defense with this dude. It's pretty interesting. Shot 51% on twos, 41% from deep, and 72% at the line. Again, Louisiana Tech, not exactly playing like super high-end competition all the time, but pretty impressive numbers there. And to me, looks like a pretty special defensive prospect. He's been a bit of a riser, it seems. It seems like he's kind of like a draft Twitter darling, which, hey, like draft Twitter often gets darlings right. If you look at, they get them wrong sometimes. There's like hype that gets built up for guys that doesn't end up panning out. But a lot of times, if the big consensus of people who watch these guys more than anybody else is like, that guy should be going higher, usually that's a pretty good call and pretty good thing to follow. The pure stocks that this guy can put up, Crawford, pretty impressive stuff. 5.8 block percentage, 3.8 steal percentage as a 6'6" wing. Was the only high usage player, which is classified. The write-up I read on No Ceilings classified a high usage guy as like over 82% of a team's minutes played. Of all of the guys who played 82% or more of their team's minutes this season, he is the only player in college basketball with a block percentage over 5% and a steal percentage over 3. That's pretty crazy. He's probably not the same on-ball defender that Ryan Dunn is, who's like deemed widely to be the best defensive prospect in this draft. But I do think there's a case with the sort of stuff he can do as an off-ball roamer helper type, jumping passing lanes, blocking shots at the rim, etc. There's a case to be made that Crawford is like a better overall prospect than Ryan Dunn, who is being projected to go late first, early second. Crawford has like an offensive game to speak of, which Dunn does not. And there's a pretty interesting offensive game here to boot. Shot 42% above the break on threes this season. That's huge. He also plays in glasses. We should note this. Playing in glasses, very cool. Adds to your draft stock, at least it should to me, because it's rad. Back to the actual on-court skill stuff. There's a little bit of passing chops there. He can kind of get into the teeth of the defense, make smart passes, lay downs, dump offs, kickouts, things like that. I think there's some passing chops there. I mostly think he features as like a really high end role guy, though. Someone who, you can get the ball in the swing, knock down a three, make a play off the bounce, that type of stuff. Maybe there's a little bit more creation to him, and that's where the sort of Pascal Siakam line sort of takes place, where, hey, like he does all this stuff as a role player very nicely. What if we gave him some more, responsibility on the ball? What would that look like? Again, it's very hard to do what Pascal Siakam has done in the NBA, but Isaiah Crawford, to me, again, as a 22-year-old guy, played 5 years in college, so very different than Mogbo. We have all kinds of tape on Crawford at this point, but he was really damn good this past season. And again, I think he maybe has a bit of a, like, of the three guys we talked about today. Mogbo, we'll talk about Chomche in a second, and Crawford, probably the lowest upside of all these guys. And actually, sort of a comp you'll see once in a while is not exactly Pascal, it's OG Anunoby. And that sort of connective wing type player is certainly what I kind of envision Crawford to most likely be in the NBA, with a little bit of a potential for the on-ball creation stuff to tick up and become more of a feature of his game. But, I think I'd probably put Crawford pretty squarely in the same bucket of guys that I'd be totally fine with them taking at 19 if they really believe in him. I am a big believer that if you take like a refined 22-year-old guy who can jump in and contribute a little bit sooner, that's a perfectly fine way to use that pick at 19 for a Raptors team that just needs more guys who can help tie things together, and certainly needs wing talent. They need guys on the wings. They need defensive talent on the ball. They need, just a lot from those wing positions that they're not currently getting, with Scottie Barnes maybe tilting more towards being a front court guy, and RJ Barrett ideally being more of a two with his lack of defensive chops on the ball. So, you look at the guys like Tristan Da Silva we've talked about, Keyshawn George, Jameer Watkins, who I know I'm probably higher on than most, but man, I love that dude. Jalen Tyson, like, I would be fine with any of those guys at 19. I think I'd also be fine with Crawford at 19, which maybe sounds crazy, but there are some mocks. If you dig deep enough, you can find some mocks where he's, projected to go in the first round, projected to go in the top 20. Like, I think one that in the Locked On Raptors Discord, our pal Stago noted that he's as high as 7 on one person's mock draft, which is crazy. I got to find that exact mock draft, but that's, I think that speaks to the sort of floor this guy seems to bring as just like a really good basketball player who knows how to play really good basketball while being a two-way guy, having offensive chops and a whole lot of defensive potential to tap into. I'm pretty intrigued by Isaiah Crawford. I would not be upset at all if he's at 19. And if he's at 31 and he's the pick, I think you should be laughing all the way to the bank. Third guy we should talk about, Ulrich Chomche, is easily, there's not a whole lot of, like, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on him because there's just like, we don't know a whole lot about this guy. Easily the most Bruno-y potential pick here that we've talked about today. Although obviously very different than the way things were 10 years ago, where, even though there's not a ton of film on him, there's like exactly 9 games worth of Ulrich Chomche available, like just for stats on it, on Real GM and stuff like that, playing over for the NBA Academy in Cameroon. There's just not a lot of tape on this guy at all. He's deemed to be extremely raw. He's the youngest prospect in the draft. Like, he is a total mystery, man. Absolutely through and through. You have no idea what this guy's going to end up being, but he certainly has a lot of the tools that would maybe make someone like Masai Ujiri, who has been known to go for tools in the past, might say, maybe he's worth a pick here at 19 or 31. Again, he's 24 in the Ringers draft board, which feels pretty high considering how little we know about him. But look, he's 6'11" with a 7'4" wingspan. He figures to me like, if you're bummed the Raptors didn't move up in the lottery to a position where they could draft Alex Sarr, drafting Chomche might be the ointment to help dull that sting, right? Like, that is a pretty interesting sort of comp. We're just like super high upside defensive big man who will probably be very at home in the modern NBA going forward on the defensive end. What is his offensive role? That's still to be determined. But there's some interesting flashes, right? He's got a little bit of passing to his game from what you see. The mobility is like off the charts for a guy that size. And hey, like, there will be references to his 38% 3-point shooting this past season. Of course, if you see that cited anywhere, please know that it's coming from a literal 3-game sample playing with the NBA Academy, I think in like the BAL qualifying sort of divisions over there. in Africa. So it's 3 games. He shot 38% on 7 attempts over 3 games. If you want to take that and say, hey, he's a shooter, go ahead. But, I wouldn't base any sort of projection of his 3-point shooting on that. That's a total mystery box. We have no idea what kind of shooter he's going to be because, again, there's just so little tape on this guy. I think if you were to draft Chomche, it's like he's your project that you draft behind Jakob Poeltl, who's your eventual succession plan, that is, to Poeltl in 3 years' time when his contract is up. And you probably then have to go get another big this offseason to be your actual backup because Chomche is probably bound for the G League next season almost exclusively. There's just a lot that needs to be learned. And this is if he even is in the draft. There's still a chance he could pull out. A lot of people expected he was going to go to college, but I do think the way he's rising seems like maybe he's going to be in the draft and just stick around. And the fact that he has decided maybe not to go to college maybe suggests there's a promise out there for him. Masai or anybody? Maybe we'll see. I don't know. But either way, I think that's sort of the plan here, right? Is like you cannot expect Chomche to do much for you for a couple of years. You have to draft him and work on the rawness and refine him into an actual basketball player. And so that's like a longer term project for sure. Which again, like if you're using your other pick on someone who's more ready to play, I think that's a perfectly fine way to go about using both of those picks. And Chomche, like, he figures to be at home in the modern NBA. 6'11", 7'4" wingspan dudes tend to be able to hang on the floor. And who knows, maybe he grows some more. He's only 18 years old. There could still be some growth in him as well. And so, you would need to find a regular backup. That makes your offseason a little bit more challenging. You have to sort of manage the salary cap stuff a little bit more deftly there because you can't go into next season with Chomche being your only insurance behind Jakob Poeltl. That is a one-way ticket to being a disaster team again, in all likelihood. But if you draft him as a project and you have, the insulation and the bigs already in house to kind of allow him to go at his own pace with the G League, I think it's totally justifiable if you want to take Chomche at 19 or 31, frankly. Again, maybe you've seen mocks where he's mocked at 55 or 60 or whatever. This draft is weird. It's just like no one seems to have a consensus opinion. I certainly don't think the Raptors are going to be going with any sort of consensus from the outside world. And if they view Chomche as someone they can mold into a future star big, I bet they will take him. And so if he's there, obviously, but at 19, he very well could be there. So I would not be shocked. I think like I'm almost expecting the Raptors to take him at 19 and be like, yeah, you don't think we should be taking this raw guy this high? Well, guess what? We're doing it because we're the damn Raptors and that's what we do. Would not be shocked at all. He obviously is not in the mold of Siakam, where he's 18 years old. Siakam was 22 when he came into the league, so it's very different there. But I do think, as far as growth from what he is now to what he can become, probably the widest gap of all the guys we've talked about today, right? Just because he's 18 years old and there's so little known about him. So if you're looking at like a once in a generation development story from when a guy gets drafted to what they become at their peak, Chomche is probably the most likely guy because he's starting from the lowest possible point of just like, who the hell knows? It's kind of wild, but obviously they spend a lot more time scouting these guys than we do in the front office and all that. So they'll have a better handle. He was obviously at the combine and I don't think is surprising anybody anymore. Like no one's going to be, it's not a Bruno situation where no one's going to be ready if he's taken by the Raptors at 19. It's certainly something where everyone's going to have their own take and their own thoughts. And, there's non-grainy footage of him from the combine and all of that. But yeah, I think that he is certainly the most Bruno-y of these selections, and that it would be many years before he's probably contributing at a high level to the team. And I guess there's also an argument like, can you afford that if you're the Raptors, right? Like, do you need guys who can help right now, or is it better to kind of plot to, like maybe we have another star added to the mix in 3-4 years who, helps raise the overall talent of the team? It's a tough thing to gamble on. It's a big bet. And, projecting dudes and future star upside is a very challenging thing to do, but could certainly see Chomche being a guy they do that with because that's just like a Raptors-y thing to do. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let us know in the comments if you disagree, or on the YouTube side of things, if you disagree or like any of the things I said today and all that good stuff. And we'll be back again on Monday as we get back to a full week of shows and keep on doing draft stuff. We'll keep on doing off-season outlook stuff. It's a fun time of year. Excited to have you along for the ride. Please follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend about the podcast. It's always appreciated when you support us. However it is you go about doing that. And again, we're on YouTube, all that good stuff as well. Join the Discord, link in the description, free to join as always. And we'll talk to you again on Monday, another episode of Locked On Raptors. Have a great weekend. Thanks for hanging. Bye-bye. Bucket.